Hey, folks, welcome to the nurseMARK and the Green Nurse podcast, where we bring you hope and inspiration for growth and healing. So, we're here to change the dialogue in the stigma around what it means to feel good or to be high, hence H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing. And listen, we talk about things that people don't necessarily want to talk about, right?
So we're
So,
here to change the dialogue, growth, and H for healing.
yeah, so we often talk about stuff that people don't want to talk about, and there was a little echo, wasn't there?
Yeah,
So
sorry about that.
yeah, no, that's all right. I was like thinking to myself, wow, I I hear myself in the background.
Echo,
What's going on?
echo.
Yeah. So what a great time to introduce you, Dr. Marion McNabb. She's the guest tonight. We're going to get to your bio in just a minute. But you know what, Doc, we talk about things that people don't necessarily want to talk about. Some things around mental health, some things about cannabis, some things about psychedelics. We're going to hit on all of these things tonight, which is just amazing, exciting. So, 2020, the year of the nurse and midwife, and we highlight all sorts of different healthcare professionals. And, I'm excited tonight to have you on as a guest because you are truly a healthcare professional. So, we don't all wake up one day and decide to enter into the cannabis industry. There's usually a compelling story behind that. And we're going to get into yours. But let me read your bio because, oh my gosh, you've been working hard. So, Marion McNabb is the president of the Cannabis Center of Excellence. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that conducts citizen science-focused population studies and programs in the areas of community engagement, medical cannabis, adult use cannabis, and social justice in the cannabis industry. The CCOE serves as a virtual resource and network of cannabis industry professionals, academics, policymakers, healthcare providers, consumers, and patients who aim to break the stigma and advance social justice in the cannabis industry. The CCOE Inc. is currently running a COVID-19 cannabis patient and consumer study. Exciting, and we'll talk about that. Dr. McNabb is the former CEO and co-founder of the Cannabis Community Care and Research Network, and that was a Massachusetts-based cannabis research company from 2018 to 2020. And they aim to improve the evidence base related to medical cannabis therapies. C3RN with UMass Dartmouth led a 2-year open cannabis consumer and patient research study to assess the impact on health, social, and economic outcomes. C3RN also led a veterans health and medical cannabis research study with UMass Dartmouth and partners. C3RN was an approved qualified training vendor for the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission's Social Equity Training Program. Dr. McNabb also holds over 15 years of global public health experience working in the areas of digital health, HIV/AIDS, maternal and child health, family planning, working primarily in Africa and Haiti. She received her doctorate in public health from Boston University School of Public Health and her master's in public health from the Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health. Welcome, Dr. Marion McNabb.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much for a kind introduction and for having me on the show today. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk all things cannabis, psychedelics, medicine, and anything we want to cover today.
Oh man, we have a lot to cover. Let's start right at the top. And we talked about this before we jumped on here. Some people might not really know what public health is. What is public health?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and very relevant in today's day and age with COVID and everything that's happening with all these public health prevention measures that we have to face every day: washing our hands, wearing the mask, immunizations. So, I guess in broad strokes, I would give a definition of public health as thinking of the population as a whole. So, public health interventions don't just look at one individual at a clinical case. So we're trying to make one individual healthy when you're in a clinical intervention. You're a physician or a nurse, A public health professional is trying to look at the population and for the greater good. What do you need to do? Without a clinical level, but also at a prevention of disease level or a mitigation of disease level. And public health looks at a variety of things. So public health folks look at infectious diseases like COVID. They also look at maternal and child health, make sure that women have safe pregnancies and healthy babies. They also public health professionals look at the environment to make sure that our waterways aren't, filled with waste and that we have clean water and sanitation. So we, make sure that kids at sports games, have the appropriate testing and the appropriate equipment to be safe from, head injuries. So there's sports medicine and all different types of public health. I specialized in sexual health in the beginning of my career. So HIV/AIDS and sexually transmitted infections. And then also just emerging infectious diseases. So COVID's quite interesting to me because that's what I used to study. But in the last couple of years, 5 years, I've been focused on cannabis and public health and cannabis.
Well, there's the question. How did you get into cannabis? Well, how did that suddenly come into your world, your sphere? Because it's certainly different from where you started out.
Absolutely. So I started out as a public health professional in global public health, but I was always a medical cannabis patient myself. Not very many people knew that. And I didn't even really know that I was a patient per se, because this is all at the time prior to medical programs existing, and where we could say, oh, there's actually a medical cannabis card, or I am a medical cannabis patient.
Right.
So I had been working in global public health and, finishing up in that part of my career, working in digital health. So looking at how technologies can improve the reach of health communication programs or data collection, for example, or data use. And it became legal for adult use in Massachusetts, where I was based, and for cannabis. And so I, decided I had been traveling internationally 60% of my life in my career doing public health work. I had never worked in the United States, so not really very familiar with the U.S. healthcare system, interestingly. But I decided, maybe in this second part of my career, maybe I focus on domestic healthcare and domestic health issues, and then see if I can explore more about cannabis and see if I can explore how to translate some of the global public health principles that I learned in research and integrating a new type of care into health systems in HIV. How could that be applicable to cannabis and medical cannabis in the U.S.? And it's been a really interesting ride so far.
I bet it has. Yeah, I mean, because it's a burgeoning area, medical cannabis. We like to say, Sherri and I like to say that all cannabis use is medicinal. Whether it's recreational or not, you're just choosing to self-medicate. So, it's super interesting that you got in on the front end of that. And then, we have these medical programs, which sometimes they're pretty crazy. I mean, we have a rec state with medical cannabis laws that are just onerous, right? So it's hard for the patient to get a medical card because they don't qualify, but they can go off and buy it on the street if they feel like it. It's kind of crazy, but anyway. Yeah.
A lot of work to be done in the system still.
A lot of work to be, but you know what, to be fair, it's still early on and we still have the federal legality issues and the other things that we have to deal with, but gosh, it's moving in the right direction, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've worked a lot in the field. I mean, we went just in the bio, I checked out the website and is, part of my due diligence and kind of learning about you. I saw the website for the current, company that you're working on. And it was fascinating, all of the study work that you guys are up to.
Thanks.
And all of the stuff that you have done in the last 5 years. Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we talk about some of the studies that you've been championing and completing out there in the public health space?
Cool. Yeah. So interestingly, when I started with C3RN that you mentioned at the beginning,
Right.
when I started that company with my co-founder, we set out to advocate in Massachusetts as the industry was going to be set up for a research license and for increased partnerships between academic sector, the healthcare sector, and the cannabis industry sector.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the cornerstones of our advocacy. I think we testified definitely over 50 times. I don't know how many hundreds of pages of writing I submitted to the state and the commission here in Massachusetts. But fast forward 5 years later, and Sherri of the Green Nurse was there alongside us the whole time,
Oh yeah.
advocating and helping shape this industry. And so now, fast forward, where we are today, and there is a cannabis research license opportunity available for companies, and the ability to have a research study license. So I think that's some really exciting opportunities now. But go back to when we were advocating.
Uh-huh.
At that time, UMass Dartmouth professor there reached out and had wanted to do some research studies, but was unable to really do it because of UMass Dartmouth and fear of losing his funding. And UMass Dartmouth couldn't take the lead because it was cannabis.
Right.
However, my professor colleague had tenure and said, you know what, they can't fire me.
Don't you love tenure?
You gotta love tenure.
You gotta love tenure. Occasionally it comes in handy because you can get stuff done.
Exactly. It's like, they can't do anything.
That's awesome.
I want to work with somebody, so I want to work with you, and you can
Right.
partner with the industry, and then you can partner with us, and serve as that academic liaison and collaborator. And so I was like, great, this is awesome. We made an agreement that we would do any kind of research study. It would be completely anonymous, and that we wouldn't collect any identifying information to put anybody at risk.
Beautiful.
And that we would make a long-standing agreement with their institutional review board and ethical review that we could do ongoing studies of new topics, and have a partnership that would be expedited review, which is a huge thing for a group such as mine to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's like, oh my gosh, we've made it. Like we're in mainstream academia here. Wow.
Yeah, and it's been really
super important.
A really great partnership, over the last couple of years, and really good for the university and good for us. And we produced a lot of great research so far. So we started off with the Open Cannabis Consumer and Patient Study in 2018. And that, just basically wanted to hear from people. Why are you consuming cannabis? For what reason? Is it for your health? Is it for relaxation? If it's for your health, what's the primary health conditions? What are the symptoms? How much are you taking to feel relief? Do you have any side effects? How do you access it? How do you access information about how to use it? And then, do you have any barriers to use? And then are you using this in substitute of other medications that you may not want to be using? And this is where in 2018 the public health data point cropped up when 76% of the people in that 2,500 person study reported they were using medical cannabis to reduce the use of prescription or over-the-counter medication.
So the cohort size was 2,500. Whoo!
And nationwide.
That can produce some significant data.
That's an actual sample size that is used in like voting and electoral elections to say you could pretty much, it's a very large sample size. So to have
it is a large sample size.
Yeah, and to have that many people within our sample size in our first study report medical cannabis a non-lethal alternative. No one has ever
non-lethal, low side effects.
Overdose, low side effects.
Yep.
To be substituting this for opioids, for even something as simple as Tylenols and Advils, which can hurt your liver after prolonged use.
Absolutely. We know in the healthcare field, absolutely, those things are not great long term.
And in the middle of an opioid epidemic, right? And in 2018. So this is now a couple of years ago, the beginning of 2018. So fast forward, we find out the most common conditions, and you probably see this all in your clinical care: chronic pain, anxiety, and depression.
Totally, the top three.
Right, top three.
Yeah.
Insomnia is a really big, symptom, or it could be a primary
It's
condition.
yeah, it's always one of the comorbidities for sure. It's always tied to the rest of them, right? Chronic pain, you're not going to be sleeping well. Depression, that could go either way. Most of the time, not, right? Anxiety, definitely not.
Yeah.
So yeah, and isn't that the beauty of cannabis, that it can affect positively all of those domains?
It can, and that's
It
what we always
does.
wanted to learn. And when we started to learn what health conditions people were reporting medical cannabis for,
Mhm.
it spans from those top three down to menstrual cramps, aggression,
Yeah.
Lou Gehrig's disease, seizure
Absolutely.
disorders, cancers,
Mhm.
glaucoma,
Yeah.
diabetes. And the
Keep
list goes
going.
on and
Oh my gosh, right?
on. So
That's why
I'm like,
that's why we have an umbrella. Where's the umbrella?
there you go, because
Yeah.
it is. It's an
Because
umbrella.
it's the overarching umbrella. It hits
Yeah.
all of those organ systems,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as a trained public health professional that has, 3 degrees from multiple, really nice universities, for me
Yeah,
not
from
to have
from some
learned this,
those are name brand universities right there,
and for me to not have understood in the last 3 years, just even this basic, simple
Mhm.
study that launched a simple survey, and
Mhm.
I'm floored, right? I'm like, wow, okay, I've been doing healthcare, HIV around the world with some of the world's experts, yet I don't know medical cannabis is this efficacious. So I'm like,
Yes.
okay, and then many people are doing this. So we proceed to start running community events and sharing information, inviting commissioners, cannabis control commissioners, different researchers, and running
Mhm.
educational events in Massachusetts around this information. And that's when Stephen Mandile, a leading veteran advocate for medical cannabis, reached out and said, I'd like to do a study in the veteran population because I believe that medical
Oh,
cannabis is
now you're talking. Those are my people.
right.
Those are my
So
people. So let's dive into that. What was that all about?
So he reached out in early 2019, and we then decided to launch the Veterans Health and Medical Cannabis Study. So for the next year, we ran another survey that had 545 veterans respond, and it was quite
Still, that's a large sample size.
it is, especially for veterans. What I
Yeah.
realized, I had never done a research study among
Mhm.
service members or
Mhm.
veterans. And I would say, that population is definitely one that's over researched, over surveyed, has to repeat their story multiple times, which can be very detrimental for somebody who's going through PTSD therapy, for
Oh
example.
yeah.
You
Relive it,
know,
relive it, relive it, relive it. That's what we're
yeah,
trying not to do, right?
yeah.
When we're treating someone.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
sadly, we did include some of those triggering, a PTSD scale on our survey as well, to how the VA measures. So I think just within that subpopulation, we didn't see as high of a response rate as a
Mhm.
normal general population. I think just for some of those reasons,
And valid
but
reasons. Yeah.
still a fairly high sample size.
Oh yeah.
And what we found was now the second most common condition was PTSD. And we
Mm.
started to drill down on understanding the conditions that veterans were reporting associated with chronic pain, and
Mhm.
PTSD is their second.
Mhm.
And a lot of service-related exposures like burn pits and obviously extreme trauma and,
Yeah.
witnessing and experiencing violent combat situations. So on our survey, we had, about half of our sample were, widely exposed to combat during service. And again, we found, like I said, PTSD is one of the top conditions.
Mm.
So as a result of that study in 2019, we partnered with the Cannabis Science and Technology magazine to launch Cannabis Patient Care, which is a magazine using the data from that study, which is a magazine dedicated to
Mm.
educating patients and healthcare providers about
Oh,
medical cannabis and by health condition.
yeah. Aren't we hoping that the VA comes on board?
Yes, and I mean,
I mean, they
every
obviously they can't right now with the way things are, but gosh, you know what? I really think they want to.
yeah, I think they do too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
where they're at is they can allow the VA, healthcare provider to record the medical cannabis use in the VA record, and
Yeah.
actually. The results of that study I was just talking about, we put forth at the State House in Massachusetts for a bill to improve access for veterans to have medical cannabis faster, basically remove the need for them to have a medical card and repeat their stories. Because that was one of the main issues that we found among the veterans that were reporting is one, they have a high level of disability and low income, and generally are really kind of unable to afford the amount of supply of medical cannabis they need for their health conditions. I mean, we go back to talking about things that we've learned in these research studies. Every health condition is very unique in what you're consuming and how much. I'm sure you see a lot of that in your.
Absolutely. It varies by individual within that particular, type of condition. So somebody with PTSD may be doing X amount. This person with PTSD may be doing this amount. So it's, it's different.
Totally.
Yeah.
And consuming by like tinctures or maybe for vapes or flower. So now the study we concluded that veteran study, and the one that we've run the past year was the impact of COVID and the impact of COVID on medical patients.
That's interesting. So what did you find in the impact of COVID on medical cannabis patients? Was it medical cannabis or just cannabis users in general?
Both, right? So cannabis consumers and then cannabis patients.
Right.
So, well, I said the first study was a lot of chronic pain, anxiety, depression. Then it shifted to chronic pain, PTSD, anxiety.
Right.
Anxiety through the roof now with COVID.
Oh, hell.
Consumers say 50% of our sample say they've consumed more since the pandemic has started. 14% actually went to go get a medical card and I think this was because the adult use side was shut down in Massachusetts.
Yeah, there was a definite uptick in medical card applications.
Did y'all see
for
that?
sure. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Have you seen a sustained increase in medical program engagement or new patients?
Yeah, I have. Well, because there's positive benefits in the state of Massachusetts, you don't have tax associated with the medical program, so it's an incentive for people who are going to be using cannabis, going to be consuming cannabis anyway. They decide, you know what, I'm going to get a medical card. Yeah.
I mean, you get the discount programs and you don't pay tax. I mean,
absolutely. There's a lot of benefits. And I think the number one benefit is you get to engage with a healthcare provider. You get to engage with somebody who's been actually trained in cannabis and how it works in the human body and can assist in coaching on how to use it, which, in many cases, we can help people use less that works better.
Totally.
So it decreases the amount of money that they actually have to spend, to use cannabis as a medicine, which is important.
And achieve your optimal dose. I mean, I think a lot of people
Absolutely
don't really understand. They also don't understand, different cannabinoid ratios and the importance of potentially other cannabinoids like CBG or CBC.
So many. Yeah. And you're right, and routes of administration, sometimes you can stack and do different routes of administration that, give that multi-layered approach that allows the product to last a lot longer and give you that relief that you're looking for. There's just so many reasons why you'd want to be part of the medical program. A huge advocate for it.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Same.
So, wow, some interesting studies. And so what was the impact of COVID on these? Was it just this large increase in anxiety and the increase in medical cards? Were there any other things in that study that kind of stood out where you said, wow, I didn't anticipate seeing this?
Yeah. So the impact of COVID had on at least the respondents in our study caused people to either, lose their job, deal with family members or friends or close loved ones that have passed away, having to learn how to homeschool. So a lot of pressures among their own society.
Homeschooling.
Like any of those pressures. So that put a money strain as well as an emotional strain and a mental strain on a lot of these respondents. Now about half of our sample were only medical patients, and 15% were only adult use consumers. The rest, minus like 3%, were consumed both medically and adult use, which I always think is very interesting because I also adult use medical. But to your point earlier, I think, potentially all use is medical because we do have an endocannabinoid system.
You do. It's if you consume it, it's going to have a positive medical benefit.
So whether or not
you're going to feel better,
you're going to feel better, and it's okay to feel better. Euphoria, even in is okay.
We talked about that, Sherri and I, one day. We talked about that on the show. We talked about what's wrong with being euphoric. Who the hell said there's anything wrong with being euphoric? May cause euphoria. Hell yes. Okay, count me in. I'm all about it.
Seriously.
Why wouldn't you, right?
Right?
Oh my gosh.
So
crazy.
And like I said, the thing that I think is interesting for me in this study is that the decrease in people reporting chronic pain is their primary reasons, for consuming cannabis. And we know that chronic pain is a big one. But
Huge.
Also within COVID and cannabis, I think I did run a virtual event in December and brought together 6 different researchers that are looking at cannabis and COVID from various perspectives, one being a prevention possibility, one being a treatment possibility, and the impact of the acute respiratory distress phase of COVID because of its anti-inflammatory properties.
Well, of course,
And then the population level impact, right? So like on symptoms, like, long haul symptoms of COVID, et cetera. So I think, there's all of that level of interesting. A lot of the studies are preclinical right now, so we can't say, hey, clinical,
No,
you can't. COVID, but interesting, compelling data.
But you mentioned the long-term respiratory effects of COVID. And, I had a dear friend who, young, 40, passed away months after having COVID because there was so much damage to the lungs.
Really?
And so, so that's, it's long-term effects can be just as deadly as that short-term stint in the hospital. So anyway.
Which is why it's important to also potentially not smoke because of the damage to your lungs, right?
Right.
And so we see in our sample that people have switched methods or they've switched their types, normally consuming with people, now having to switch to consuming alone. But in this study and the other ones as well, in addition to folks reporting the use of medical cannabis to reduce medication use, prescription medication use.
We see that all the time.
Do you?
Yeah, we do. And we always caution people, like, what? Don't just stop your meds. Hold on a minute. You know what? Talk to your physician. Do this slowly, but inevitably, people end up off medications.
Yeah, and it's really important. I'm really glad that you counsel them to think
yeah,
about it because there's a lot of interactions, right? Like statins and cannabis, or when you're taking yourself off a cocktail of meds.
Oh yeah. Because that's how it happens. The cocktail of meds, you start taking a med for this and it has a side effect. So they give you a med for that, which causes another side effect. So they give you a med for that. And it ends up being this large cocktail that you end up taking. So so cannabis, we both know can help people wean themselves off of a lot of those that they don't need to be on once cannabis is on board.
Totally. And then 41% of the people in our study are using cannabis to reduce alcohol.
I love that idea.
18%.
I thought about this. I've frequented a few bars. I went in the Marine Corps when I was 17. So I've been to a few bars in my day, right? And needless to say, especially at that tender young age, there were a lot of bar fights. Well, I can guarantee if everybody was using cannabis instead of alcohol, there wouldn't have been any bar fights. As a matter of fact, there would have been bar hug-alongs, it would have been a total love fest. That's just the truth of the matter, right? So I'm so encouraged to hear that some people reported that they were consuming cannabis to avoid drinking more, which we know part of the result of the pandemic was people did use a lot more alcohol. There was a large increase in alcohol use.
Yes, and there's obviously an increase in PTSD.
Yeah.
And PTSD among our healthcare providers.
Oh,
themselves.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, and rise in alcohol use. Yeah, and so anything that we can provide or offer as an opportunity that's an alternative.
Yeah.
I mean, I myself use medical cannabis to not consume alcohol and to continue to not consume alcohol. So anything to use it as a harm reduction.
Love it. And that's what it can be. It can be a harm reduction. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned healthcare workers. I had in one of the things you said, are you getting ready to do a healthcare provider medical cannabis study?
Yeah, we actually just launched into it. Yeah. And
Tell me about that.
from the data that we've collected, we've been focused on patients and consumers. And so I feel like we've surveyed a lot, why do you consume cannabis? What are you consuming for? What do you know? Where do you get your information? And now that we have that, we found that a lot of the patients, when we ask, does even the veterans specifically, does your healthcare provider know or is aware around medical cannabis? And the results are typically not aware, right? There's not a large.
I had something happen this week, Doc, where I had a potential medical card client reach out on Drift on the chat and said, if I get a medical card, will my primary care provider be notified? And the answer in the particular state that they're in was yes. And they said, well, and I can't get one.
I don't want it, right?
So opposed. My primary care physician is so opposed to cannabis as a medicine. And it made me so sad to think that this person's not going to benefit from cannabis because of some uneducated primary care physician.
Yeah.
Yes, that's just who it is. I'm going to just call it as it is, uneducated. So sad.
And it's sad. And, the education around the endocannabinoid system and the benefits of this was removed out of our, healthcare education curriculum decades ago and removed out of our pharmacopoeia. So in response, we launched a healthcare provider knowledge, attitudes, and practices related to medical cannabis study together with medicinal genomics. So medicinal genomics is a great group out of Massachusetts. If you don't know them, they are more on the genomic side of research in cannabis. They've mapped the cannabis genome, and they run CanMed, which is a conference every year for clinicians and researchers around cannabis.
Exciting. Yeah, I spent a fair amount of time in the rooms in these different research organizations, and I just love it. Yeah. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Some people may, fall asleep, but me, I'm there just consuming. Oh, tell me more. Tell me more about what's going on with the plant. Yeah, exciting stuff. So your study is for healthcare professionals to determine what their attitudes and beliefs are around
and their knowledge.
And their knowledge.
Yeah, and if they currently incorporate it in their practice, and if they don't, how would they want to learn about medical cannabis, and what specifically do they want to learn, and how do they want to learn it? And so we are asking any type of healthcare provider, so physician, nurse, pharmacist, emergency medical tech, substance abuse counselor, public health professional, to fill out the survey. It's anonymous. And the cool part is our engagement approach this year with the different healthcare providers will be taking data at 3 different points this year throughout the study and reviewing what we're finding from healthcare providers together with healthcare providers and start to identify different topics of education that potentially the field and different educators can focus on to make sure that we're meeting the learning needs of healthcare providers.
Yeah, I think it's been backwards. It's been backwards. We haven't taken the feedback from the healthcare providers to determine what the hell do they want to be educated on, right? First of all. And so people are just going out and building all these educational units that might not be meeting the needs of the healthcare professionals, really.
And really wanting to engage with them or something that's relevant to their everyday work, So let me give you an example. Let's see, about a month ago, I had a colleague who's in dermatology, interestingly. Reach out. Oh, actually, not dermatology. She was an ENT. Sorry, ENT, nose and throat. And she reached out to me because she said, "I've been seeing patients coming in with COVID with loss of taste and smell. but my patients that consume cannabis are reporting benefits to this. And, they can get their taste and smell back. And I'm really curious, is cannabis doing something around that? And so studying these things and understanding trends and understanding and educating from our healthcare providers who may be seeing it, they may not know much about it, but the patient's telling them, I'm consuming cannabis and this is helping me. It's not like they're asking about it, right?
Right. If the patient's going to be willing to share that they're doing cannabis to begin with, if most people don't want it on their record, they don't want that.
The woman didn't get a card because she didn't want a doctor.
That's exactly right. Yeah, people just don't want it on their record. Wow, interesting stuff. So, do you need any more people for that study? Are you recruiting? Are you good?
We are recruiting. This will be a full year-long study. So, if you are a healthcare provider, please take the survey. And if you're interested and working with us, we'll be reviewing this data and sharing it and designing education and curriculum and outreach moving forward. We are going to launch a very cool guerrilla marketing campaign this month and next. So if you are a healthcare provider and you want to take the study, please share it along with your healthcare provider friends. And we'll be announcing some incentives for that.
How can they get involved? How can they contact you to do that? We're not wrapping up yet because I got one more subject I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
How could they get a hold of you to jump on this?
Yeah, so you can go to our website at the Cannabis Center of Excellence, www.cannacenterofexcellence.org, and you'll see healthcare provider study. So you can take the survey there, and then within this week, we'll be launching, a citizen scientist campaign where you can sign up and you'll get a free hat and a free T-shirt for becoming a cannabis citizen scientist.
I heard free stuff.
Free stuff's always awesome.
Free stuff's always awesome.
Yeah, and it's good quality. It's good quality.
Even if it was bad quality, it's free stuff. So, the heck. I don't know about you. I've done some pretty crazy things for free stuff.
Yeah. There you go. And we'll also be sending, flyers and cards and signs that our citizen scientists can use to hang around in their neighborhood to spread the awareness for healthcare providers to take the study. Then if they're interested, we'll send data and presentations back to these cannabis citizen scientists, and they can present the data at whatever outlet they would like or request us to present with them. So sometimes in some of the studies that we've done with some of our partners, we've presented in front of like city councils or in front of, different healthcare audiences or, different ways to make policy change or education. So
that's, educating legislators is the only way we're going to get change.
Yeah. And our fellow
peers. The only way it's going to happen.
Yeah.
We're not going to force the issue. We're going to have to educate, handhold, bring them along. Boom. We'll get it done. I love that term, by the way. Cannabis citizen scientist.
Yeah.
I want to be one of those, Marion. I want to be a cannabis citizen scientist.
You're signed up as our first one.
I got my lab coat. I'm ready to go. I feel very scientific.
Thank you. You want to know where it came from? Cannabis citizen scientist?
What?
So, have you ever heard of the term citizen science before?
No.
Okay. It's a term that I followed in global health and a field I followed in global health for quite some time. It's the role, it was born out of actually like bird watching and now more in environmental health and environmental sustainability work. So it's the idea that a citizen is a scientist, can be a scientist without having formal training in collaboration with trained scientists. So in the environmental health world, for example, I could be a regular citizen, I can have my phone, I can go out and I can take pictures of, a dirty river and report that with a GPS estimate into a cloud where everybody, other citizens are reporting environmental
crowdsourcing. Powerful.
So thinking about that concept, we applied that to cannabis. And so for the last couple of years have explored how do you use citizen engagement in these ways where we collect the data, but then we use the data for change. So that's how now in our cannabis citizen scientists, we'll have people out there that'll help us collect data and then they can Use
feet on the street. Man, that's awesome. What a way to engage the public in being a part of this whole thing.
Right?
Wow.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Super
Exactly
cool.
what we're trying to do.
Yeah. All right. So we're down to, I think, 2 last subjects. One thing I want to touch on, social justice. What's going on? What have you been doing? Because I saw that mentioned in there, and I am a huge advocate of social justice. So
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
listen, we need old white men to be for social justice. You know what I'm saying? We
And to
do.
pull out their pockets and checkbooks to support it.
Bingo. Exactly.
Yeah. So
I can make the case for that.
So I've always been obviously working for social justice issues in my previous career in global health, but in cannabis, it was a core pillar of the work since I started in cannabis, next alongside the research. So had continued and started to advocate in the beginning for restorative justice. If folks that are listening don't know, there was a horrific war on drugs, and that was really aimed against people of color. And
okay, so let's just put a fact in there. Our former president, the one who resigned, Richard Nixon, John Ehrlichman, one of his cabinet members, in an interview with Time Magazine, a couple years after Nixon left office, admitted to the journalist that the war on drugs was all propagated on race and Nixon's hatred for the anti-war movement. And he admitted in the magazine, we couldn't go after the blacks directly and we couldn't go after the anti-war people. So what we did is we created a war on drugs.
Yeah.
Which is still perpetuated today, which needs to go away.
Yeah. And, people of color are significantly
adversely affected by this. Absolutely. Data shows it. It's truth.
Yes, and people are still in jail today. And in Massachusetts, people are still targeted for color based on targeted, wrongly.
Yeah.
So 4 years ago, we advocated and worked with the state's setup of their social equity program in Massachusetts. And Cannabis Community Care and Research Network, C3RN, my former company, was a Cannabis Control Commission social equity training vendor, one of the 6 approved vendors in the first year. It was a long road to get there, and we successfully completed our first year of 11 courses, and COVID hit. And unfortunately, COVID hit. It had a negative impact on C3RN as a company. And so C3RN had to close, and therefore the contract with the CCC wasn't able to be transferred to the nonprofit that I run right now. So sadly, we would still be training vendors, but sadly, we are not. However, at the Cannabis Center of Excellence, we have a very exciting program launching next month, which is together with Minorities for Medical Marijuana, which is a apprenticeship program and an internship program for those who've been negatively impacted by the war on drugs in Massachusetts, to have workforce and business training opportunities with regulated partners in the industry.
As there should be.
Right? So we're really excited about that.
Yes. Oh, we could go on that subject. And we should probably just do one show just on that, Marion.
Yeah, we should. And we should invite Darrell.
You know what? I met Darrell a couple of years ago at an event.
Nice.
We exchanged cards. I was like, I'm with you. I'm with you. He's a great guy. I'd love to do that. Yeah, we're gonna definitely do that.
Cool.
All right. So I saw you've been I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to do a special research and data education apprenticeship as part of the program. So, not just the typical standard-of-the-meal internship. So we're going to try and create more citizen scientists.
Yes. All right, we're going to need to know more about that. Now, I saw on your resume that you were in Africa. So I'm going to switch the conversation to a plant-based medicine that comes from Africa, originated there. Let's talk about psychedelics. Let's talk, because it's plant-based medicine and we're all about everything plant-based medicine. Ibogaine. Tell me about Ibogaine.
Wow, what an incredible plant and shrub that, as you rightly point out, is found in Gabon, West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a plant-based medicine that's been around for centuries and used for a ceremonial rites and also for healing in Gabon in very special ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I had known nothing about ibogaine until I would say probably about 4 months ago. I don't know how long you've known about ibogaine.
Oh, I've known about it for about 10 months. So we're both
Okay, you know
relatively
a lot
new
more
to
than
this,
I
right?
have.
Well, I'm only 10 months into this thing, but I've been so super interested in it. Like I've looked at all of the different psychedelics, and I'm working with some folks now in a psychedelic medical therapeutic area. So I'm super focused on all of them.
Cool.
But ibogaine especially because I know specifically ibogaine is very efficacious in regard to addiction, in regard to, in regard to getting rid of those habits that we don't want to have.
It is.
Yeah.
So, in my own personal journey, I myself suffer with PTSD. It's one of the medical conditions that I qualify for medical cannabis for. And many of my travels around the world, they were great, but I also had a lot of incidences that were quite scary and caused a lot of trauma.
Bet some of the places you traveled.
Yeah, and some of the some random incidences that kept me up at night and caused me to drink a little bit more than I often wanted to sometimes. So earlier this year, I actually was part of. A colleague reached out to me. Actually, it was about late last year. A colleague reached out in the community in Massachusetts, letting me know that he was starting a movement, a group to work to decriminalize psychedelics in Massachusetts. And I was like, that's really great. I mean, there's psychedelics like ayahuasca and, MDMA, psilocybin, and all these really, really promising treatments for anxiety and depression and, addiction. And so I was like, great, that he reached out because I advocate for medical cannabis. And so then there was a couple of groups that started. So Bay Staters for Natural Medicine here in Mass, and then Decriminalize Nature, which is nationwide.
Right, I'm familiar with them. And so, Massachusetts should be looking at this. MGH just opened a research center,
right?
For psychedelics, right?
Right.
And MAPS is here, and
MAPS is here, and in Amherst, and there's been a ton of sort of interest in this area and different clinical trials going on. So as these groups started to ramp up, they asked me to think about advocating for decrim in Boston and at the state level. And I was at this meeting, and this woman was telling me about ibogaine. So this is only a couple months ago. It's the first time I've ever heard of it. And she told me that she quit drinking with ibogaine and that it was highly, highly successful. And I was like, okay, well, ibogaine. So then all of a sudden I'm like, well, that's great. You hear all these testimonials, but I'm like, it's ibogaine. So then I'm going to these meetings and they're like, ibogaine. And I'm like, what is ibogaine? And I'm like, well, this is cool. And this is only a couple months ago, right? And I'm like, this is really cool. And then so I start to research and I'm like, wow, I'm like 60 to 70% success rate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, with really, really hard drugs and opiates and all this stuff, I'm like, wow. And then I'm like, well, they're using it for veterans treatment for PTSD, and I have severe PTSD, and it really impacts anxiety and depression. And I was like, So within 10 days, I had booked a ticket, found a place in the Bahamas, and decided to try it. And so 2 months ago, I went to the Avante Institute. Yep. And I took a clinical ibogaine for 24 hours experience, and I have not had a drink since. Whew. It's the most incredible experience I've ever had, and I haven't had a panic attack either. And I'm telling you, you could snap, and I would be like this before.
Of course.
I've heard shots, and I haven't even.
And you're like, hey, what was that? Wow.
Even tonight, right before this, I was at dinner outside on a patio. And I was having a Frito pie, which I very much enjoy from this place. And a truck backfired. And I normally literally would freak out, fall off.
Oh, because your body's in fight or flight all the time.
And I was just like, oh. And this was tonight. And it was an incredible experience.
2 months ago, you had this experience. Now, see, that's why psychedelics need to be legal. That's why we need to be able to have access to them. Now, let me ask you, what was the experience like?
It was really incredible. So for the first 6, so very clinical. I had a physician and a nurse that were there the whole time. I
Mhm.
was fully wired with an EKG and an IV. So there are cardiac risks associated with it.
Right.
And so I did do a full battery of tests before, cardiac health tests, all of my, blood levels and everything
Yep.
before I took it. I also detoxed from alcohol, so I was there a couple days in advance.
Mhm.
And I was in the Bahamas, so it was very beautiful. So
Yeah, it
I
is.
was also swimming and
It's
just able
idyllic.
to kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, just kind
Now
of
I know
like,
with some of the other psychedelics like ayahuasca, they say that there's a diet that you should prep and eat certain foods and there's sort of some ritual associated with it. Was that the same with ibogaine? Did you have to sort of you said you detoxed from alcohol, but did you have to have some like a plant-based diet or what was that like?
yeah, I mean, I did it from a clinical perspective. So they
Right.
really had me abstain from caffeine,
Hmm.
mainly primarily because they don't want you to stay awake longer than 24 hours. And
Right.
so they're trying to really rid you of caffeine, but also to have a healthy diet before you go in there. You don't
Mm,
want any other substances. You don't want to be hungry, but they
right.
also didn't have me drink water before a good amount of time before I did it because when you're in the experience, I couldn't physically walk myself. So when I did go to the bathroom, they had to walk me to the bathroom. You're like this,
Ah.
like my entire body is like,
Oh.
it's a full body experience. So it was 24 hours in
Oh, I
complete
wanna
darkness.
go. I
Um,
wanna go have this experience.
it,
That's oh,
it was amazing. It was amazing.
uh,
So the first 6 hours, they give
yeah,
you. I had a number of pills. It was a pill and it was powdered, and they gave me first dose, and then let me make sure that I can adjust to it. Okay. After 30 minutes, they dosed me, titrated over 6 hours. The first 6 hours was so fully psychedelic. My body is shaking. I'm in this like seeing myself, and I'm looking at all of my memories and everything that has happened internally in my body throughout my life, but I'm
woo,
looking at myself with this lens of compassion. So it was good things, it was bad things, it was things that I had done, it was things that were done to me, but it was me looking at myself with an eye of forgiveness and just watching all of these
oh,
things happen. And it was just like half of, a lot of people see visualizations. I saw visualizations, but it wasn't like out of like, it wasn't too much.
yeah, yeah,
But that was the first 6 hours. The second 6 hours, you're kind of like still in that psychedelic phase. You're seeing visions, but you're on a little bit of a slower track and you're kind of processing what you just experienced in the first 6 hours.
okay.
And it's kind of like, whoa. And you're just like letting it happen, but you're
Whoa, I just saw my whole life flash it's like a near-death experience because your whole life flashes by you is what I'm hearing you say.
yeah, a little bit,
Like it's
and
real.
watching those things happen, and what it's doing is chemically resetting, and
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
whole process of it's a very spiritual drug, and so there's a connection with the universe, a connection with this energy that you come to realize that we're part of a much bigger system than
Mhm.
just us, and
Oh, yeah.
in this experience, I realized that we're part of a much larger system, and I was kind of watching me. And then I came back to me, and I was like, "Whoa, that was a lot." And then in the last 12 hours of the 24-hour experience, they really want you to, sleep, and it's obviously you're tripping on a psychedelic, like you're
Yeah.
tripping, so it's kind of hard to like go to sleep. So I made sure and spoke with them in advance that I would be able to use medical cannabis as a way to continue, and they allowed me to do that, and that helped me sleep.
Oh, perfect.
And so I was able to process everything. I woke up, and they said I had done it perfectly. And honestly, I've been in a number of very, very tempting situations, and I haven't had a drink. And I also,
Amazing.
like I said, this
Amazing.
anxiety, it's really
The
incredible.
anxiety, that right there is what blows me away because I know, I have people in my life that have PTSD and I know that jumpy state. I can just touch a shoulder and it's startle, that response. So I know what you're talking about. and to have that removed after one 24-hour session, that to me is mind-blowing, groundbreaking mental health treatment.
Yeah, it
It
really
really is.
is. It really is. And
Amazing.
and I think it's personalized, it's different for everybody. I mean, somebody with very severe combat exposure might, react differently than I did. But I mean, I've had
Mhm.
sexual assault. I've got, I don't need to go down my bearing lists of
Right,
reasons
right.
why, but I think what it actually does is it kickstarts from a chemical perspective
Mhm.
your dopamine and your serotonin that has
Mm,
either been dwarfed by the PTSD and the anxiety or the fight or flight
right.
or addiction to other substances. So it
Mm.
basically removes the withdrawal symptoms, which to me is like, wow, that's what's
Hello.
missing in our current rehab. You're
Yeah.
reliant on your willpower to say, I'm not going to have this drink. When this chemically was like, think,
Yeah. Hey, let me just push a reset. Ding. Okay. Here, you don't have to drink now. Your choice. The
and
choice is no.
if I'm driven to drink, then it's not necessarily a chemical thing at this point. And maybe it is chemical, but in
Yeah.
some ways, I mean, we still need to do a lot more research on what's residual and how long does this last, because they're doing
Right.
studies of, do you relapse between after ibogaine, after, X number of
Well, so
months or
early
whatever.
on.
But
Yeah.
they're finding it for opioid addiction. The guy who was in there doing it with me, he was an opioid addict, very high success rates with heroin,
Yeah.
alcohol addiction, you know.
So let's get it into the rehab space. Come on. Let's do
It's
it.
really,
Am-
really important.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges with
Mm.
ibogaine specifically and with these plant medicines and moving into integration, I think they're key for mental health as an option moving forward, especially with
Oh,
COVID.
yeah.
All these new, having a microdose possibility of psilocybin even alone could be huge for our
Absolutely.
populations. But what I think we need to really be careful about is how we do it and how we counsel around it and how we have ongoing care. That
There has to be
experience,
some integration afterwards. There has to be some support, some aftercare.
you know,
I think personally, I think that just it needs to be a component of, hey, I'm going to do this experience to try to have this outcome, and I'm going to be supported for a period of time afterwards.
yeah, and especially people who haven't done psychedelic medicine before.
Yeah.
Like, I think
Oh,
the only way that I could handle that, which was one of the strongest psychedelics on the planet, was because I had LSD before in a very strong dose. But it
who
sounds like you're
who
really
hasn't?
excited about it. I want to
There's
introduce.
people out there who haven't done that.
Yeah, I know, right? They don't know.
Nobody in my circle.
But like I've told people, and they're like, the idea of 24 hours in darkness, tripping my brains out, freaks me the blank out. There's no
Yeah.
way I would ever do that. You, on the other hand, Mark's like, sign me
I'm
up,
like,
man.
let's go. Hell, give me the number now. I'm going to make a call. I'm gonna make a call.
I'll look you up.
Hello.
I'll see if I can get a discount.
I'll be down tomorrow. Oh my gosh. Totally.
No, but
Oh,
I do recommend if people are interested and for you to continue to explore it. It was amazing.
oh yeah, absolutely. That's wild and wonderful and so exciting.
Yeah,
So
it was
we're
incredible.
gonna kind of slowly kind of wrap up. Is there anything that you wanted to mention or talk about or bring up at this point?
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to chat tonight and to be on the show and for all the work that you all do at the Green Nurse. I mean, you are providing patient care and education and trying to get the word out. So thank you. And
Trying to get the word out, and yeah, thank you for what you do and all the amazing work that you've done so far and the amazing work that you're going to continue to do.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You too.
So we got, we have your contact info down in the show notes, but people need to get a hold of you. Again, it was Canna Excellent
Canna Center of Excellence.org.
Canna
So
Center of Excellence.org.
Yep.
Wonderful.
And you can find us there. If you're interested in helping us get the word out and becoming a cannabis citizen scientist, we would love it. We're launching today, so you can find more information on our webpage. And then we are on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and Twitter. So find us on any one of those social accounts. We'll be posting more about it. And we'll be presenting at some upcoming conferences, NECAN in Boston and others. So
Well, I
more
hope
about our
to
work.
see you face to face.
Yay, good.
Hey.
We'll get to give each other a hug. Awesome.
Absolutely. And hopefully I'd done ibogaine by then. So
Yay, then we should talk about it together.
we'll have a lot to
We need
talk
a
about.
psychedelic panel at NECAN.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun. Well, Dr. Marion McNabb, thank you so much for joining me tonight on the nurseMARK and the Green Nurse podcast. You've been a fabulous guest, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do in the space going forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. Thanks
All right.
for the time, and thanks for the podcast tonight.
Absolutely. Folks, thanks for tuning in tonight. Appreciate your support. Love you all. And you know what? It's all about living your best life ever.